She was already walking out when he grabbed her wrist. Not roughly. Not with anger. With the particular desperation of a man who has spent his entire life knowing exactly what to say and has just run out of words. His fingers were cold. His grip lasted exactly 2 seconds before he let go, like he had remembered himself, remembered who he was, remembered all the reasons a man like him did not do things like this in the middle of a crowded Seoul street at 11 o'clock at night. But she had stopped. And that, the stopping, was where it all truly began. You're watching Midnight Seoul Love. If you've ever stopped when you should have kept walking, subscribe now and stay with us. This story is just getting started. 3 months earlier, she had not known his name. Adiz Nwosu, Ada, to everyone who mattered, had arrived in Seoul with 2 suitcases, a research fellowship from Seoul National University, and a timetable so organized it had its own color-coding system. She was 29 years old, a linguist from Lagos via London, and she had come to study the sociology of code-switching in diasporic communities, which meant she spent most of her days in libraries and community centers listening to the way people rebuilt language when they were far from home. It was precise, solitary, absorbing work. She had structured her entire life around it. She had not come to Seoul to feel anything she wasn't already expecting to feel. But Seoul, she discovered, did not consult your plans. The city was relentless and vertical during the day, glass pressing into sky, commuters moving with the focused urgency of a people who had decided collectively that stopping was for other places. But after midnight it changed entirely. The pojemika carts appeared on the side streets, orange awnings glowing over steaming pots of tteokbokki, oating broth rising in slow clouds. Old men sat outside convenience stores playing baduk with the unhurried patience of people who had stopped racing something. The Han River path filled with couples and cyclists and solitary nightwalkers eating cup noodles on the grass, watching the light fracture on the water below. Ada had found this version of Seoul by accident, a wrong turn on a late library night, and she had fallen for it the way you fall for something that was not in the plan, which is to say completely and without warning. She went back most nights. Not to the same street, Seoul had too many, but to the feeling of it, the after-midnight softness, the city's permission to be a person who was still finding their shape. She was, she told herself, here for the research. The fellowship was 2 years. After that, London. After that, a lectureship she had already been shortlisted for. She had a subway line of a life. She had stops. She knew exactly where she was going. She had not accounted for the language exchange program. And she had certainly not accounted for Seo Junho. His life, unlike hers, had been planned by someone else. Seo Junho was 34 years old, the director of the structural engineering division at Seo Construction Group, and the eldest son of a man who had built approximately 1/7 of Seoul's visible skyline over 4 decades. This was not a metaphor. His father had once pointed from their apartment window in Apgujeong at a cluster of towers and said, with the offhand certainty of a man stating geography, "Those are ours." Junho had been 8 years old. He had understood, before he had words for it, that this kind of inheritance did not leave room for other kinds. He had studied structural engineering at KST. Joined the firm at 25. Rose through it with the methodical efficiency of a person executing a plan drawn up by someone who loved him but had never once asked what he wanted. At 22 he had mentioned, briefly, recklessly, that he wanted to study architecture in Berlin. His father had not raised his voice. He had placed a legal pad on the table and said, "This is what a CEO does." There was no malice in it. There was only the weight of a family's direction, which moved like a river, forward, always forward, without consulting the landscape. By 34, Junho had everything the legal pad had specified. The title. The penthouse in Gangnam. The company car with the driver. The reputation that arrived in rooms before he did. He had succeeded by every measurement his father had taught him to apply. He was not happy. But he had understood for years that happiness was not on the legal pad. It was a private arrangement, made quietly in the margins of the life you were actually living. He had assumed, without examining the assumption, which was the problem, that he would make this arrangement eventually. He had not examined the assumption until the night of the firm's annual gala, when his deputy director stood at a microphone in front of 400 people and said, proudly, into the applause, Director Seo has never had a life outside this company. That is why we are all here tonight. The room had clapped. His father had nodded. And Junho had sat at the head table with his champagne untouched, feeling the words settle into his chest like a structural assessment that had come back with a fault in the foundation, accurate and therefore worse than any insult. He had excused himself 12 minutes later. He had found the fire exit stairwell. He had sat on the third step from the bottom and he had pressed the heel of his hand into his knee and he had stayed very, very still. He had been there for 20 minutes when the door opened and Ada Nwosu pushed through it looking for the bathroom. She had not expected to find a man sitting on the steps like someone had taken the ground out from under him and he was simply waiting for it to return. She had not expected his eyes, red at the rims, carefully controlled, the eyes of someone who had been trained since childhood to keep things off their face and was losing the battle by millimeters. She had not expected to feel, looking at him, the particular recognition of a person who has also spent years being impeccably composed in rooms where their real self had no safe address. She had expected a stairwell. She had gotten something else entirely. Sorry, she said, first in Korean because she had been practicing, then in English when her Korean sorry landed wrong. I was looking for, wrong door. He looked up at her. A long moment passed. Then, in English that was accented and precise, it is okay. You can stay. She was fairly certain he meant go. But she looked at the held jaw and the too still posture of a man afraid that movement would unravel him, and she made a decision that had no rational basis and did not require one. She sat down beside him. Not in the way that required conversation. Just beside him. Two people in a stairwell while a party happened above them, glass against glass, polite applause, a speech building to a crescendo no one below would hear the end of. After a while she said, whatever it is, you don't have to go back in there tonight. He turned and looked at her. Really looked, the kind of looking that happens when someone says something you stopped expecting anyone to say. When she stood to leave, she said, without entirely planning to, I teach a Nigerian pidgin session on Tuesdays. At the Hanam Language Center. Free. You should come. Why? He said. Direct. Unguarded. Because, she said, you need something to do on Tuesdays that isn't this. She left. He sat in the stairwell 4 minutes longer. Then he straightened his jacket and went back into the party and shook every hand that needed shaking and said everything the legal pad required. The following Tuesday he arrived at the language center at 6:58. The classroom was small and warm and smelled of the chin Ada had brought from the Korean African grocery near campus, small fried dough knots, golden and faintly sweet, in a wide bowl near the door. She was standing with her back to him when he arrived, writing Oya, let's go across the whiteboard in purple marker. 5 other students were already seated. A Japanese architect named Kenji who declined to explain his reasons for being there. 2 American exchange students who had found a flyer. A Nigerian Korean woman named Myri whose mother was from Enugu and who already spoke fluid pidgin but came, she said, because she liked how it sounded in an unfamiliar room. And a German professor of comparative linguistics who took notes as if he were documenting a species. Ada turned. She saw Junho. Something moved through her expression and was adjusted before it could be read. You came, she said. You said to come, he said. He sat. He looked at the chin. He looked at her. It's a snack, she said. Try one. He picked one up. He ate it. He nodded once, with a quiet thoroughness she would come to understand was how he responded to things he genuinely liked, no performance, just acknowledgement. She began. Pidgin, she told them, was not broken English. It was not a simplified language for people who couldn't manage the real thing. It was a language that had been built, deliberately and organically, for the specific human situation of needing to be understood across distance. Every language had its architecture, she said. Pidgin's architecture was intimacy. It was designed for proximity. For people who needed to reach each other before they had a shared grammar. Junho wrote this in his notebook. He underlined the word intimacy. He did not examine why. She taught them how you day. She taught them the responses, I day fine, the social one, the door that closes politely. And then the honest one, I day manage. I am getting by. I am still standing. I am carrying what I am carrying and I am not asking you to take it from me. It is not a complaint, she said. It is actually a kind of grace. It means, I see you, I know you care, but I am okay enough that you don't need to worry. It protects the other person. Myri said, quietly, my mother used to say that. Every time my grandmother called from Enugu. Always I day manage. I never understood until now that she was protecting her. The room went still for a moment. Junho looked at the phrase in his notebook. I day manage. He thought about his father's pleased nod. He thought about Park Sung-min's voice into the microphone. He thought about the stairwell and the heel of his hand on his knee and all the years of performing fine in rooms where fine was the only permitted answer. He wrote underneath, still standing. Not asking you to fix it. At the end of class, Ada went around the table. Introduce yourself in Pidgin, one sentence. When she reached Junho he looked at his notebook, looked up, and said, with the precision of a man measuring a critical joint, my name Na Junho. I day manage. The vowels were right. The rhythm was right. The weight behind it was entirely his own. Ada looked at him for a moment that lasted longer than a moment. That, she said, was very good. He looked back at his notebook. She noticed that he was trying not to smile where anyone could measure it. She filed this away. He came back the following Tuesday. And the one after that. By the fourth session he was the most consistent student in the room, which surprised no one who had spent more than 10 minutes with Seo Junho. He prepared. He reviewed. He arrived with questions already written in his notebook, which he opened at the start of each session and closed at the end with a precision that felt almost ceremonial, like a man for whom rituals were a form of respect. Ada found this unnerving. Not because it was unwelcome. Because it was not. A rhythm had formed around the edges of the official sessions. He arrived early. She was always already there, arranging things that didn't need arranging. They talked, in English, in fragments of Pidgin, in the Korean she was assembling word by careful word. She taught him idioms. He corrected her Korean pronunciation with a patience that felt less like correction and more like calibration, like he was tuning something that was already nearly right. One evening in late October she made him repeat a phrase 3 times and on the third attempt said, without thinking, Oya, good, you got it, and he looked at her with an expression she couldn't immediately classify. Something warm and slightly stunned. The way a person looks when they hear their name pronounced correctly by someone who learned it from care, not convention. What? She said. Nothing, he said. Then, my mother would like you. She said, I'll take that, and moved on to the next exercise. But on the subway home she turned the sentence over like a stone that might be interesting on the underside. His mother. She had not yet understood what it meant, in Junho's particular world, to be brought near the idea of his mother. It was a Tuesday evening in November, late into the session, when he asked her. They had been talking about Han, the Korean concept he had been reaching for words to explain, the compressed grief that becomes something else when it is held long enough, the sadness that lives in the body and is passed between generations like a genetic trait. She had said it reminded her of Waala, the specific weight of trouble that comes not from catastrophe but from being fully, messily alive among other people. He had leaned forward slightly at that. The way he leaned when something landed exactly right. Would you have dinner with me, he said. Saturday. In Insadong. There is a restaurant my family likes. She said yes before the hesitation could organize itself. She did not think about the phrase "my family likes it" until she was standing at the entrance to a private dining room on Saturday evening and found not just Junho but his mother, Seo Youngja, 58, silver-threaded hair, silk blouse, the composed watchfulness of a woman who has spent decades reading situations before they develop. Beside her was Junhee, his younger sister, 28, a UX designer who looked at Ada with the direct curiosity of someone who had been briefed. And at the head of the table, Seo Dongjun. The father. Compact, white-haired at the temples, with eyes that had spent 40 years evaluating structural load and had applied this habit uniformly to everything else. Ada understood in approximately 3 seconds that this was not dinner. This was an introduction. In Junho's world, in the specific world of a chaebol family managing its image and its legacy and its unspoken emotional architecture, you did not bring a woman to your family's restaurant in a private room unless she was significant. Unless you were making a statement. Unless you had already, privately, decided something and this was the way you made it visible. It was not a proposal. It was a declaration of direction. His mother's presence was not surveillance, it was acknowledgement. His father's careful questions were not interrogation, they were investment. His sister's frank stare was, by the emotional grammar of this family, warmth. Ada did not know any of this. She sat. She smiled. She answered questions about her research in careful Korean and then English when her vocabulary ran out, and Junhee bridged the gaps with an ease that suggested she had prepared. Youngja asked what she ate in the mornings. Ada said akamu and chin chin when she could get it, and Youngja laughed with her whole face and said she would tell her the Korean equivalent, and Ada felt, in spite of everything, a small dangerous warmth at that. Junho sat beside her and said almost nothing. He refilled her water glass. He passed dishes before she asked. He was attentive in the way of a man who is also, she realized slowly, nervous. At the end, Youngja took Ada's hands briefly in both of hers and said something in Korean Ada only partly caught. The words she understood were, careful, good, and the verb for hoping. On the 6th evening, his phone lit up. A voice note. In Pidgin, which she had never sent him before. Her voice came through slightly breathless, traffic audible behind her, the distant sizzle of a street cart. Oya, I day here. I day manage. We need to talk Sha. Tuesday. He listened to it 4 times. Then he wrote back, slowly, consulting his notebook, I day here too. Tuesday good. She arrived at the language center before everyone. She had brought jollof rice in a container and sujibi that Myri had taught her to make, the dumpling soup thick and savory, the noodles hand-torn into shapes her mother would have called charming. She had also dismissed the class early. She had not told Junho this. He walked into an empty room. He looked at the food. He looked at her. Sit, she said. He sat. She sat across from him and put both hands flat on the table, her tell, he had learned, for something prepared and important. The dinner, she said. What were you telling me? That I am serious, he said. About what? He looked at her steadily. About you. The room held that for a moment. You didn't ask me if I was ready to be told that, she said. No. I didn't. That was wrong. He paused. Found the shape of it. In my family, bringing someone to that room is not pressure. It is not a demand. It is how we say, I see you clearly, and I am not treating you as temporary. I chose the action before I gave you the language to read it. I am sorry. She studied him. She was reading him the way she read languages, looking past the surface for the grammar underneath, the structural logic of the gesture. Why me, she said. Genuinely. She wanted to know. He did not flinch. Because you sat down next to a man you didn't know in a stairwell, and you didn't ask what was wrong, and you didn't leave, and you told him to come on Tuesdays. Because every Tuesday since then you have treated every word I am learning like it is worth learning. A pause. Because you taught me I day manage and you explained it like it was dignified. Not sad. Dignified. The Sujibi had gone cold. Neither of them reached for it. I have a fellowship, she said. 14 more months. Then London. Then a lectureship. I know. My life doesn't have space for, she stopped. Started again. I didn't come here for this. I know, he said. I didn't either. I had a legal pad. She stared at him. A legal pad. It is a long story, he said. And I want to tell you all of it. If you will let me. She let him. Not that night. That night they ate the sujibi and jollof rice and she taught him the Yoruba word anu, the tenderness given without condition, the care that expects no return in kind. He wrote it in his notebook and set it back with the almost exactness that had stopped surprising her and started doing something else. But over the weeks that followed, through December, through the cold that settled over Seoul like a long exhale, he told her things that had not been spoken aloud in years. She did not extract them. She simply made a quality of space that made speaking feel less like exposure. She was a linguist. She knew that the frame of a conversation changed what could live inside it. He told her about Berlin. The architecture school application he had submitted at 22 and withdrawn quietly, without telling anyone, because by the time the acceptance letter arrived the legal pad was already on the table. He told her about the stairwell, not the surface of it but the specific internal sound of Park Sung-min's words, never had a life outside this company. He told her about sitting in that room and feeling the applause land on him like a verdict he had not agreed to and could not appeal. She listened without saying, "That's terrible." Without saying, "You should have fought back." She said, after a long pause, "While a day." He looked at her. "Trouble is present," she said quietly. "And you have been standing in it very politely for a very long time." He laughed, full and unguarded, the second time she had heard it, and she filed it in the same internal place as the first. She told him things too, which she had not planned. About London, the specific exhaustion of being the only Igbo woman in most rooms, the constant low-grade labor of making yourself readable to people who did not have the vocabulary for you. About her mother, who ended every Sunday call with "I am proud of you, Aquia, okay?" As if the pride needed to be confirmed, as if she were always checking that Ada had received it. About Lagos at Christmas, which she had missed for 2 years running, and the specific smell of it, suya smoke and harmattan dust in her grandmother's kitchen at 6 in the morning, a smell she could not fully render in any language she possessed. He listened with the quality of attention she had first noticed in the stairwell and had spent months trying to name. Not passive. Not waiting for his turn. Genuinely oriented toward her, the way a structure is designed to face light. He remembered everything. 3 weeks after she mentioned suya he told her he had found a place in Mapogu that sold Nigerian-style beef skewers and he wanted to know if he had gotten it right. He had not gotten it right, she told him. But the wanting to was exactly right. In January he took her to Dongdaemun at 2 in the morning, the fabric market, the street stalls, the old men playing jangi under bare bulbs with instant coffee in paper cups. He bought her hadiak from a woman who had to be at least 80 and who looked at them together with total uninterest, which in Seoul, Ada had learned, was its own form of belonging. "This is where I come," he said, "when the apartment is too quiet." She understood. She had the river. He had this street. Everyone living inside a life too large for their actual self had a place like this. They ate standing up, the hadiak scorching their fingers, the filling running down her wrist. He handed her a napkin without being asked. The city moved around them, indifferent and alive, the way cities are when two people are becoming something and the city has not yet been told. "You know," she said, "in Pidgin there's no separate word for like and love. There is just one verb. Like him. It covers both at once." He looked at her. The street lamp was orange. The vendor was already on to the next customer. "That seems right," he said. His mother called on a Wednesday in February. He told Ada about it the following Tuesday, sitting in the empty classroom after the last student had gone, his notebook open, the cap still on his red pen. Youngja had heard, through the precise and efficient channels that Korean family networks maintain, that the woman was a foreign researcher. That she was on a fellowship. That she was leaving. She had not said, end it. She was not that kind of mother. She had said, I want you to be clear about what you are asking of yourself. She had said, a heart does not know about timelines. She had said, be careful with her, and be careful with yourself. She likes you, Junho said. That is why she said it. If she didn't like you she would have said nothing at all. Ada looked at her hands. She's not wrong. About the timeline. No, he said. She is not. The silence between them was the honest kind, not the charged silences of earlier months, but the specific quiet of two people facing the same true thing from opposite sides and measuring the distance between them. I don't know how to do this, Ada said. A statement, precise as a measurement. I have never been somewhere that felt like it could become mine. I have always been the fellowship person. The exchange person. Passing through. And I, he said quietly, have been standing in one place so long I forgot that was a choice. He looked at his notebook. Then he closed it, carefully, which he had never done in the middle of a conversation with her. Can I show you something? He said. He reached into the back of the notebook and took out a folded paper, worn at the creases, and placed it on the table between them. She unfolded it. It was a structural drawing, hand-rendered, meticulous, the lines of someone trained as an engineer who had once wanted badly to be an architect. The interior of a modest building. Skylights cut at precise angles. Light falling in long diagonals across a wide open floor. In the margin, in his small careful handwriting, designed so the sky is always present. So no one inside forgets there is more than the room. Where is this? She said. No one gu. A community center. I designed it at 27, before my father gave me the directorship, when I still had small projects. He paused. It is ordinary from the outside. But inside, no matter where you sit, you can see the sky. He looked at her. The structure is fixed. The view moves. She looked at the drawing for a long time. I am not asking you to stay, he said. I am asking you to let what is between us be what it is, for however long you are here. And after that, he stopped. The structure is fixed. We will see what is visible from it. She thought about the river at midnight. About Youngja's hands around hers. About I manage, still standing, not asking you to fix it, and how she had taught it as a phrase about dignity and he had received it as a description of his own life, and somewhere between the teaching and the learning it had become a conversation neither of them had planned. I have been calling you temporary, she said. In my head. Since October. Because it felt safer than the other thing. What is the other thing? He asked. In Yoruba, she said, there is a word. Ayanmo. That which is tied to the self. The thing that is already attached, that travels with you no matter where you go. She looked at him. I have been calling you temporary because I was afraid to call you that. He was very still. Ayanmo, she said again. Quietly. Like something being placed down carefully after a long time of being carried. March came with a quality of light that was different, not warm yet but luminous, like the city was preparing itself. The river path was busy again. The cherry blossoms were not yet open but the trees were dense with the intention of them, the branches thickening towards something that had already been decided. Ada's fellowship had 14 months left. Junho had told his father, in a dinner that was not easy and that both of them would remember differently, that he was no longer declining the Berlin fellowship. An international joint project. His firm had been invited for 3 years running. He had said no each time. He was saying yes now. His father had said, this is about the woman. Junho had said, "It is about me." She helped me remember that. His father had been quiet. Then, in a voice smaller than his boardroom voice and more holy itself, he said, "Your grandfather used to say the buildings that last are not the ones that refuse to move. They are the ones that know how to move and still stand." Junho had texted this to Ada at 11:45 that night. She had been on the river path when it arrived. She read it twice, standing at the water's edge with the city refracted in pieces below her. Then she wrote back in pidgin, "I hear you Sha. I day here." He wrote, "I know. That is everything." On the last Tuesday of March they closed the session early. This had become a ritual, Myri gathering her things with a knowing look, the German professor packing his notes with the deliberateness of someone who understood more than he acknowledged. Just the two of them again. The round table. The whiteboard still carrying old words in colored marker, Waala, Han, Ianmo, and in Junho's handwriting, in the bottom corner, left there deliberately weeks ago, Jean Jim. Sincerity. The kind that comes from the center of the chest. Ada had not erased it. She had brought Suya. He had found a better version, still not exactly right, but closer, the groundnut crust crackling the right way, the heat arriving where it was supposed to, and he had carried it across Seoul in a paper bag, warm, the smell of it already between them before he sat down. She handed him a piece. He took it. He ate it the way he had eaten the first chin-chin, months ago, quietly, with his whole attention, like something worth the full weight of his notice. "Better?" he asked. "Closer," she said. "I will keep looking." She knew he would. That was the thing about him, the thing she had been circling since October and could finally look at straight. He was not a man who said things he didn't mean. He was not a man who began something he wasn't prepared to continue. He had shown up at 6:58 every Tuesday since October. He had learned every word she taught him like it was a door. He had been building, quietly and patiently, towards something that required all the doors to be open. "I want to see the building," she said. "In no Wongu." He looked at her. "You said you can see the sky from anywhere inside it. I want to see what the sky looks like from a fixed point." He reached into his current notebook, the fourth since October, and took out the folded drawing. He placed it on the table between them. She picked it up. She put it in her bag. He watched her do this with the expression she had filed away in the early weeks, warm, slightly stunned, trying not to show how much it mattered. He had never gotten better at hiding it. She had stopped wanting him to. "Oya," she said. "Let's go." He stood. He closed the notebook. He capped all 3 pens, including the red one, which he had finally, 2 weeks ago, begun to use. Outside, winter was finishing itself with a certain reluctant grace. The air was still cold but thinner, threaded through with something that was about to become spring. The night market was starting up along the street, tagbaki, roasted chestnuts, the particular damp stone smell of a city exhaling after a long season of holding itself tight. They walked north through Hanam-dong. Close but not touching, until the bridge, where she reached sideways without ceremony and slid her hand into his coat pocket, and he closed his hand around it without a word, without theater, the way he did everything that actually mattered. The Han River moved below them. Seoul spread in every direction above and around them, enormous and lit and magnificently indifferent to the fact that 2 people were crossing its bridge in the cold and becoming something neither of them had planned. In pidgin, she said, as they walked, "There is no future tense the way English has one. You don't say I will go. You say I go. The action is already in motion. Already happening." He was quiet, turning it over. "I go," he said. "Already happening." Another quiet stretch. The water below, the city above, the cold air between them thinning. Then, in the pidgin he had been building word by patient word since October, the language designed, from its very beginning, for being understood across distance, "We go together." She tightened her hand in his pocket. "Yes," she said. We go together. The bridge held them. Below, the river ran on. Above, the first suggestion of cherry blossoms caught the light from the street lamps, pale and tentative, not yet open, leaning towards something that was already, quietly, inevitable. That's our story tonight.